container grown trees can be planted anytime. But fall and winter, it's a lot less stressful on you and the material if we do it in the cooler season.
Yeah.
But it's so important to know how and why we plant them as we do. Most people that do have issues with their newly planted material is because they are improperly planted.
That's true, and there's a couple of keys to that if
Right.
we can just concentrate on getting that part right, it'll be better for the tree in its early development and then all the way really through the rest of its life.
Exactly. So we've got a nice fruit tree here.
We do.
And so you're going to find with the fruit trees a graft.
Right.
So they're grafted onto rootstock that makes them more disease resistant. So,
Right.
and in some cases more cold tolerant.
That's true.
But we need to make sure that we plant this tree properly with this graft.
That's true. And one of the things that kind of confuses people sometimes is that it depends on the age of the graft.
Correct.
So in this case, we can clearly identify this graft.
Sure.
This is what we call the rootstock material, and this is our desired variety. But sometimes the graft can be old enough that a clear line like this is not visible. Sometimes you can tell because the texture of the rootstock will be a little different than the texture
Right.
of the desired variety, and so you can kind of tell from that. In this case, we want to make sure that we don't bury this.
Right.
And so that's the first thing, is to, if it is a grafted tree, identify the graft to make sure that this is not buried. We really don't even want it buried by mulch, so we're clear. Then the second thing that's the most important is to identify the root flare.
Right.
And what the root flare is the point where the trunk and the root plate separate, that dividing line. So we see so often in garden advice that it says plant your tree at the same depth as it was in its nursery container. And that's true, but we still have to find the flare because trees get moved around,
Sure.
They get jiggled, sometimes soil falls out, sometimes soil is put back in. So often just during handling,
Right.
that root flare can kind of get away from you.
Sure.
So when we plant this, rather than concentrating on this height right here, we actually want to get your fingers in it and do some exploring. And look here, how far down we have to go before we actually see that, okay, the flare is down here almost an inch deeper than the rest of the tree. I can feel the initial roots starting right about here.
I can feel one here
Yep,
too.
right about there.
Absolutely.
So we can see from the moisture line that
Right.
if we'd planted this at container depth,
Right.
we'd have been too deep.
Sure.
So don't be afraid to do that. You won't hurt your tree. You may have a few of these little surface roots that you get uncovered. That won't hurt a thing.
Right.
Really get down there and make sure that you can feel that, and you really know from feeling these initial roots that, okay, that's the level that needs to be even with my final grade.
Correct.
Then after we do get it planted and mulched, we want to try a couple of things. If you're mulching with something loose and airy, like our favorite pine straw,
Yes.
or even fallen tree leaves, then we can kind of afford to bring a little of that right up close to the trunk without causing issues.
Because it breathes.
Because it breathes, and only because it breathes.
Right.
But if we're mulching with a finer ground material, say a bark type mulch, then we want to be careful to mulch close but not right over that root flare. Leave it open.
And that's such an important point. We see that so many times when trees start declining,
Right.
that they've buried it
Right.
in mulch.
Exactly.
And you see these big, as Randy used to say, the big mulch volcanoes.
Yeah,
Yes.
mulch volcanoes. But even just if you're a great mulcher, even that, we want to leave that open.
Right.
One of my favorite ways to do it, because when you do that, you say, great, but now I have the weediness and the drying out right around the trunk, is I use a donut of pine straw around the trunk, pulled right up to it.
Right.
Because it never packs down, it always keeps good airflow. Then I can use my wood type, my bark type mulches out around from the rest of the tree, but get that good aerated donut right around the trunk itself. It's a really great way to do it, and the trees love it. And some things you'll notice if you have already in your landscape, some root flares where you say, I really don't think I found it, I might have a problem there. A lot of times that's where your extra sprouts will come from. A tree that's stressed out will just start sending up lots and lots of sprouts. Get down there with a little trowel, gently dig around until you say, okay, here's the root flare. And you may not want, depending on the age of the tree and how
Right.
long it's been planted, you may not want to just uproot it and start over.
Right.
But you can always shallow dish it out until you have open root flare, and then you taper out to the rest of
Right.
your tree's major root ball.
Right.
And so we've looked at this one. Now look at one that's not a grafted tree. And here we have a case where we're getting lots of surface roots, and that's
I see
fine.
right here, yeah.
Right. And it won't hurt anything if we just kind of dig and explore until we see it. And this one has not been buried as much.
No.
And so we say, okay, here's where, we have these little surface
Mm-hmm.
roots, but here's where my initial roots are. And you can see why we call it a root flare. It's where
Exactly.
it tapers out at the very base. And we really see this in large established trees like our pecans and oaks.
Right.
You can see that basal flare, and that's how they grow in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we're trying to do, is give it what it would have had a seed fallen in that
Sure,
tree grown in
sure.
nature. So those are the things to look for. Identify the graft, make sure you don't bury it, then dig down and find that root flare, and don't worry about this top soil. That can be worked into your planting hole or
Right.
around the garden, and just make sure that we get down and plant it at the proper level.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You bet.